Hey everyone, I'm Michelle Zarilla, and I help lead user research efforts and accessibility efforts at Insomniac Games. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a half Filipino woman with wavy brown hair, hazel eyes, and I'm wearing an Insomniac t-shirt. And today I am excited to host our very first Accessibility Community Spotlight, where developers from PlayStation videos chat with community members who are spreading the word about the importance of gaming accessibility and making a positive impact. Today I am honored to be joined by author, gamer, and Senior Director of Development at AbleGamers, Steve Spohn. Hey, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell me a bit about yourself?
I appreciate the introduction. Yeah, my name is Steve Spohn, Senior Director of Development at AbleGamers. I am a fluffy white gentleman. He, him are my pronouns, and my scruffy beard, which probably needs some sort of manicure at this point. I don't know.
That's awesome. So I'm actually curious how you first got involved with AbleGamers. Did you start out with peer counseling sessions? Was there something else that kind of started it all for you?
No, when I started with AbleGamers, peer counseling wasn't even a thing that we had thought of yet. I actually used to be a low-level MLG player. I was somebody who was into Starseed Tribes. I loved running around and shooting fiery disc lasers at people. And one of the fun things about being a gamer who's been around for a long time is you got to see how the industry has kind of grown up. And how I got started was really being just an arrogant little 20-year-old, as I'm sure none of us in this audience know what that's like whatsoever. Back then, I was, just looking for help. I have a disability that is progressive. When I was born, I was the strongest that I will ever be. As time's going on, spinal muscular atrophy is taking away my ability to use my muscles. So I can't really use my arm. I only can use my hands, and I have some head and neck movement. But other than that, I'm mostly quadriplegic. And that has been something that's been happening to me slowly as time's been going on. So I used to be able to use a keyboard and a mouse, and I didn't have to use technology. I was somebody who just gamed like everybody else. And I was losing that ability, and I needed a way to continue to play. And so I did some Google research, and I saw that there weren't a heck of a lot of options out there for disabled gamers to find information on how you continue to play even if you have a disability, except for one place, AbleGamers. And AbleGamers had this article up about how if you were a gamer who only could use one arm, you basically couldn't play World of Warcraft because you need both hands. And I was like, that's wrong. I'm using two hands on the mouse, which is effectually one hand. I am so smart. So I wrote up this big old, Reddit comment style blog saying, "You're wrong, AbleGamers. I'm right because I'm 20 and I know everything." And I fired it off, and I got an answer from the founder of AbleGamers, Mark Barley, who was basically like, "Oh yeah, you think you can write better? Well, write better." So I was like, I will. And then I was like, oh no, I have to do work now. Damn it. And so I got talked into writing an article on how you could actually play World of Warcraft with just one hand. And someone came up to me who was not able to play before and said, "That was amazing. I can't believe you not only wrote this, but you were right. I can play World of Warcraft and I'm enjoying it now. Thank you so much for doing it." And it was the sweetest piece of chocolate cake you have ever eaten in your life. It was the best feeling, helping someone else out. And since then, I've just been addicted to helping others on their journeys to be the best gamers they can be.
I actually wonder if you and I have ever played WoW together. I was a big time. I was a big time raider back in the day.
If you ever play it on Whisper Wind or one of the servers connected to it, then it's quite possible.
You kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but can you tell us a little bit more about AbleGamers' mission and the efforts to support the community? You already mentioned the peer counseling, but I'm curious, can you tell us more?
Of course, AbleGamers is a 501c3 nonprofit organization creating opportunities that enable play in order to combat social isolation, foster inclusive communities, and improve the quality of life for people with disabilities. The lawyers make me say that. What it actually comes down to is we are an organization that helps people with disabilities be able to play games and improve how they play games, no matter what that may mean. So that may mean me reaching out to an amazing gaming organization and saying, hey, here are a couple of cool things, or here's a couple of problems where we're getting reports from people with disabilities that they're having problems in this area. And then sometimes the organization will say, sure, we'll do that. And other times they'll say, hey, can you help us with that? And when they do, we actually have a full course on accessible.games where developers such as yourself can go and check it out and say, oh my gosh, this is really cool. Here's a pattern that applies to my game, or here's this really cool resource I can use to make my game better. And we do that as a public service to the community to help developers make better games. We also have an engineering department that comes out with all kinds of cool adaptations. And the user research department itself is another wing of AbleGamers where we reach out and we do all kinds of cool things with Michelle and others in the user research community who basically say, hey, what is it that the community really needs? How do they interface with our game? How do we enjoy the game the most? What are the challenges? What are those obstacles that people just can't get around? But the number one thing we do that people talk about is, of course, the smiling people who are using their new controllers to play video games. But at the end of the day, no matter which pillar you're talking about in AbleGamers, it's all to the same goal, to get people to enjoy games.
That's awesome. I love that mission.
I'm pretty okay with it.
User research.
I appreciate that. User research is one of those that don't often get the spotlight, and I wish it would.
Especially when it comes to accessibility features, inclusive design is making sure everybody has that seat at the table and making sure, you are our users, you are our players, so we have to involve you. If we don't, we're doing everybody a disservice.
Absolutely. It's a matter of taking into account everyone's experiences. The accessible player experience is, not only a trademark for AbleGamers, but it's a mission statement that we live. It's all about, do people have fun?
So I'm actually curious, what were some of your favorite games growing up?
MMOs for me were such a life changer, and I think a lot of us today, we don't quite appreciate what we've got in these communities. The internet sort of let us get together and make these amazing communities like yours and on Sony and every single different PlayStation game and has their own community built around it. And it didn't always used to be that way. It used to be kind of siloed, and the only way you really understood each other was by buying the same GamePro magazine. And now, we all get together and we talk about how great these games are, and we experience them together, watching them on Twitch and whatnot. And MMOs were the first thing that really let you experience that. I fell in love with a game called Ultima Online. It was one of the very first MMOs, and I was where I learned that I could have a second life outside of my own, where I wasn't limited by the physical disabilities that I had here, because there everyone saw me as the same. I was just the guy with the dragons, murdering bad guys and protecting the innocent. Those kind of games were crucial to me in my upbringing. Playing with the consoles, my PlayStation and my friend's garage were formative moments for sure. In fact, one of my friends even built a little ramp on the side of his house. Well, his dad built a ramp on the side of his house just so I could come inside, and we didn't have to play in the dusty garage anymore. And those were amazing, but my love has always been for MMOs and going out and playing with community members. I guess you could say I've always been someone who likes community.
That's so awesome. I remember some of my first games, especially with playing with my brother, was Contra on the Super Nintendo, Secret of Mana. That was so fun for us. But MMOs, Ultima Online, we actually never got to play it. My father purchased it because we were so excited, and then he found out we had to pay a subscription, and then he returned it.
Oh no.
But then, years later, I got into World of Warcraft with my brother as well. And so WoW was super formative for me. It's actually a very big reason as to why I'm in user research in video games, because of those communities. So
I think it's something. It's what brings us up, right? It's what we learned as a way to connect to our communities. And I feel like you playing with your brother and me playing with my friends, it was a connector, right? And that's something that I feel like the get good side of the community doesn't always appreciate. These are all just ways for us to connect to one another. It's less about the game it's more about the experience. It's more about being able to play with your loved one. The games are great, and I'm super glad some of these now today, especially titles, are so spectacular. That said, I would be just as happy hanging out with my gaming group, playing just about anything, as long as we all got to hang out with each other. I think that's what's most important.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I like to think of it as games are something that I love, games are something that you love, and making sure games are accessible gives everybody else a chance to love them with you.
That's right. Let everybody play. When I started, having configuration options where you could just remap the buttons on your controller was a controversial subject. It was something that some people didn't want to have a controller be remappable because it was against the vision of the developers on how the controller should operate. Sounds a lot like some of the arguments we have nowadays, doesn't it? So, where we've come from is not necessarily so far from where we were. There are some parallels and some similarities, but I think overall accessibility keeps growing. My favorite way to remind people of how far we've come was when AbleGamers first started. This was probably 13 years ago or so. We went to one of the very first game developer conferences, and GDC was big. It wasn't as big as it is now, but it was pretty big still, with everybody going who was in the developer world. And we set up a video camera in the lobby, and we said, let's just ask one question. Have you ever thought about designing for people with disabilities? And we asked this to dozens of people, and a lot of them said no. A few people said yes, and one guy laughed at us and walked off camera. And, the people like the guy who walked off camera probably are not in this industry anymore because they didn't believe the gaming is for everyone. And now we are in a much more inclusive environment. And I think as long as we remember that there's a difference between diversity and inclusion, diversity is being invited to the dance and inclusion is being asked to dance. There's a difference. So as long as we remember that it's not about diversity but inclusion, making sure everybody is a part of the table, then I think we're on the right track and we'll continue to get better.
So I'm actually curious, you mentioned this just a little bit ago, like you went to GDC years ago before it was what it is now. And you were honored with the Ambassador Award. And that was a fantastic speech, by the way. I loved it very much. What was the experience like for you?
That was phenomenal. Honestly, getting to speak in front of an audience willing to listen is one of the most endearing feelings, the most empowering situations you can possibly imagine. As, some of you might imagine, Michelle, I'm not going to speak for you here, but I'm guessing that you have felt once or twice in life like you weren't being heard. And yeah, it doesn't feel good, does it? It's not a good feeling. And I think something we can all identify with, right? And when you're fighting for accessibility, as I do, as you do, you can be ignored quite a lot. And it felt good to have a moment where everybody stopped and just heard the message. And what I really tried to do, very purposely, and I gotta thank my good friend Alana Pierce. So if you didn't see the speech, Alana, one of my best friends in the world, introduced me, and she very meticulously did not mention the word disabled during her entire speech to define me. She spent 4.5 minutes talking about who I am and what I did and didn't mention. And when I took the podium, I didn't mention AbleGamers except for one time. And the reason that we both did that is that she wanted to make it a point that what I did not because I was disabled, but to help other people with disabilities. And what I wanted to prove was it's not particularly about AbleGamers. It's about a mission. It's about making things even on this playing field for people with disabilities. Even if you listen to the founder of AG talking, it's not about the company itself. It's about the movement of inclusion. It's about this movement we all started and we all live. And what I really wanted to impart to people with that speech was that we do not have an infinite amount of time, and that you can choose to make a difference with the energy that you have now, and that you can make a difference. Too many of us believe if we don't have a blue check mark that we're just not going to be listened to, and that couldn't be further than truth. People, just as yourself and user research know, all the voices are heard. It's just the ones that are repeated are listened to the most. So if we all band together and we all continue to demand that things be better, that we are better, then eventually the tide starts to get changed.
So awesome. Actually, that kind of answers my next question a little bit of how can people support AbleGamers and how people can support this mission. And so, being that agent of change yourself. So I guess then the question is examples or ideas of how to be that agent of change.
It's all about looking at the world around you and realizing what is in your purview. What is it that you can actually change? If you run up against a problem that you can't change, that won't change the paradigm. Change the way that you're looking at the problem. So if you are colorblind, or you have a color deficiency, or if you are deaf or blind, you can rally your friends to get the attention of that company, and you can change them by continuing to submit feedback and yell on Twitter in a nice way. And you can ask developers to reach out and do their part. You can demand change in a very respectful way. And that's how you support AbleGamers, is if the cause of people with disabilities is what means the most to you out of all the wonderful causes that are out there, just pick a subject and try to be the champion of that particular change. Try to make a video game better. Try to get, the company that you want to pay attention to hear your cries about that one particular issue. And that's how you make change. And then after you do that, pick another one, do it again. Pick another one, do it again. That's how you become an advocate, is just by seeing a problem and then figuring out small ways to help it get better.
I will say, especially for Insomniac, obviously, that's the only one I can speak for personally. But, we do have support tickets. Like, we do read those support tickets. The community team will actually route them to me, and it's really cool when people use them. But also Twitter. Like, I very much appreciate the please be respectful when you... Yep. Ask for change or share your story, but those mean a lot to me, and we do pay attention to that. Even if we can't respond to everybody, it is absolutely super important, especially for accessibility. A number of the features and things that we've done, or the arguments that we make for either a current game or future, they come from the community. So this is very important to us. So I actually do have one final question for you.
Yep.
Who won the stare down between you and Ryan Reynolds?
I think the audience won.
Well, thank you, Steve, so much for joining us today. It was so fantastic getting to know you, hearing your stories, sharing fun anecdotes, sharing very sweet inspirations. So that was very heartwarming. So please, everybody, make sure to check out his channels. Links will be in the description. And please visit ablegamers.org to learn more about how you can help.
PlayStation